Hey everyone, this is Terry Mitchell from the Voice on Fire interview series. And for those of you who may not have been following along, I have the opportunity to interview some of the most amazing people, both locally to me in Australia and also around the world. These people are people that I consider are real action takers. They're passionate about projects where they're making a difference either within their communities, nationally or globally. And today, my guest is Leif Cocks, who is quite remarkable in the project that he is passionate about. In fact, he's involved in so many amazing things that I really was looking forward to sharing this platform with you today. Leif, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on board.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what I'd really love to do, Leif, is to get the audience to get familiar with what it is you do. And they can probably see from that banner in the background, the Orangutan project. And I know you've got quite a remarkable amount of knowledge about that particular critically endangered species. Let's start off by asking you what it is you actually do. Now, I know that's not going to be an easy question. You've been in the conservation related services for quite some time. So start out by telling us what it is you're currently doing.
In the most broadest philosophical sense, is it's the intelligent expression of love for all beings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it's about compassion, love for all beings, and expressing it intelligently. And we all have a sets of skills and knowledge, and we obviously use that as a focus to express our love for all beings. From a strategic point of view, climate scientists are telling us we've got the next 10 years to turn the situation around. Otherwise, we'll get these trigger events that will spiral the globe out of a recoverable biosphere to support life. And it's no coincidence we have the same 10-year window to save enough viable ecosystems where the megafauna such as the orangutans, elephants, and tigers, as well as the indigenous community, can survive this extinction crisis. So our main game in the next 10 years is to save 5 to 8 complete ecosystems of the right type, shape, and size of rainforest to take the megafauna and all the biodiversity and local communities through this extinction crisis and pass them on to future generations to rewild the planet, because we have to rewild about 30% of the planet, as well as reforming agriculture and obviously reduce fossil fuels in order to save the planet. So it's a combination of those three things that strategically have to happen. And so we're going to pass on the recoverable ecosystems that future generations can build on, but not only they're going to be environmentally sustainable, we're making it economically sustainable by developing with the indigenous communities viable and profitable forms of agriculture under the rainforest canopy. So this is always going to be a win-win situation. It's never wildlife versus people or the environment versus the economy. These are false dichotomies that people put in our way. What we're building is a better world for all living beings on this planet, including the non-human persons whose rights are not recognized as yet, and take everybody to a better place.
Wow. Yeah, that's well, you've said that so succinctly. That is a monumental task. I mean, those ecosystems, they're not small projects that you can just spend a weekend doing. These must be a lifetime commitment, and not just from people such as yourselves. How do you get other people involved in understanding the significance of what you've just spoken about?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as you're mentioning, it's not a short term, and a lot of the grants and charities are not effective because of the short term, unstrategic nature of the action. So indiscriminate charity causes more problems than it creates. And so I call conservation a marathon with hurdles with a boxer punching you in the face every 50 meters. So it's not for the faint-hearted. It's a hell of a slog, but it's well worth it. It's one of the most effective ways that we can help others. The next part you touched on, and it's key to everything we do, as humans, we're not actually very good and very effective when we're alone. The only way we can actually be effective is by joining together, collectivizing. The example I give is, if you want to earn a little bit of money, go get yourself a job. That's fine. If you want to earn a lot of money, you collectivize capital and to a corporation, and then you have the capacity to make a lot of money. And so the effectiveness of the Orangutan project has really nothing to do in some senses with us ourselves. It's ability to love, care, connect, support others in a community of mutual benefit that allows us to become effective. We collectivize conservation efforts with some great people with great skills in a way that's going to strategically provide the outcome that we need. So it's our ability to work with others and connect with others is probably our most important asset. And of course, each of us as individuals bring on skills, energy, and ability that on our own is not very effective, but combined together is extremely effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the words you hit on there, combined, when we think about ecosystems, it's not just, oh, you've got to go grow more trees. Those trees are home to certain species, and you need to grow certain types of trees to accommodate those species. And, at the rate that we're demolishing rainforests, we're not just demolishing one type of tree, we're demolishing whatever's in that forest that was growing in the undergrowth, and all the different little lichen and moss and things that are in that particular environment that other little bugs are, no, it's all part of the food chain. It's all part of the system, the biological system. So the idea that we're doing just one thing isn't really enough. So how do you help people to understand the significance of all the different parts to the projects? Obviously, the orangutan and the elephant and the tiger, hugely important to save them. I mean, I cannot imagine a world without them, but it's not just save those animals. There are the entire habitats and environments. How do you get people involved in understanding that side of it?
It's first of all, it's conveying the truth that these are win-win solutions. A more biodiverse rainforest provides better environmental services for local communities, stores more carbon to mitigate climate change, and provides the area for predators to reduce pests naturally, and allow agriculture to actually be far more sustainable in the long run. And so all these are win-win solutions. So just again, let people know that there isn't this false paradigm of having to sacrifice for the future or for what we're trying to do is the benefit of every living being on this planet. The second part, how to communicate with that. It's actually strategically very difficult, because what we've learned in conservation is, if it's too gloom and doom, we have to present people the problem. If there's no problem, why would you want to participate in solving it? It's solved. Yeah. So we do have to present the problem in a way possible, but we have to quickly move to the fact that we can actually solve this problem, which is true, we can. Otherwise, people naturally want to turn off. This is, why would I want to hear this? I'd rather stick my head in the sand. And that's most understandable. But then we also want to take people to the next step and to understand that goodness is its own reward, generosity is its own reward. And in fact, if we're more generous and loving to others, we are happier in ourselves. So a life of selfless service, of giving to others, is not a life of self-sacrifice. It's a life of joy, love, and gaining all. And so at those three levels, the intellectual, emotional, and then that the very personal level is to say this is a wonderful win-win situation at all levels of our beingness. And I try to take people on that journey. So that's why my first book was more technical about orangutans. The second one was more about my personal journey and the need to save orangutans. And my last book's Finding Our Humanity is very much about connecting people and making the journey where people are happier, more content, and more fulfilled through joining and collectivizing with others to make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that stood out for me amongst all of that as you were speaking about that is, if we see it all as doom and gloom, yes, that will trigger for some people that they feel they're compelled to make a difference. But as you say, most people will feel overwhelmed, or just in some way it'll be just too much and they'll switch off. The thing that stood out for me was giving people a sense of hope, particularly people that may not have thought about any of this sort of stuff before they became parents. And I imagine that people that have got kids may well be thinking more along the lines of, I cannot imagine my child not knowing the joy that I had at the zoo or at the resort, wherever I saw these animals, knowing that they exist, because so few of us would have real personal one-to-one real exchange with animals in their native or natural habitat. I only ever knew of animals through the zoo experience, but that didn't stop me from feeling that there's a bigger world out there that in some way I must be able to make a difference. So I suppose there's got to be some understanding of where people come from in, knowing how do they see the world of hope? What's the driver for people? And I really, I like what you say about giving people an understanding at different levels about, why it's so important to take the necessary steps. And it's not all sacrifice. Some things are about contribution. And you mentioned, and I'll slip it in there, you were talking about the books that you've written. I really wanted to touch on those. You've written those 3 books, and were they all about the orangutan? Was there a different theme, or was that what you were writing about?
All the books are somewhat autobiographical in a sense. It's about my journey at different levels. And so the first one is, I guess, more about my academic journey. The second one's more about my personal journey with orangutans, from birth to free in the wild. And the third one is actually more my, for want of a better word, the spiritual journey. Because I'm a firm believer that we cannot reform the world unless we reform ourselves. As an example, if you're feeling unhappy or in pain, we're short-tempered, we're selfish, we don't get along with others, and therefore we can go on a crusade to save the orangutans or anything, but we'll eventually destroy everything that we create, because we'll need power, name, fame, position in order to support our sense of lack of self-worth within us, and ease that pain from that lack. But if we find that joy and love within our hearts, and then we're just naturally expressing that love for all beings through us, then we have all the energy in the world. And that energy then is applied in a positive way, and we can truly make a sustainable outcomes. So if I'm not, as I say, I'm not suggesting we go away and contemplate our navels in the Himalayas for 10 years before doing anything. But I always recommend to people, especially young people, if you want to start on a journey to make the world a better place, you need to also work on your internal world while you're helping work on the external world, because they have to go hand in hand. And we have to have, because the integrity of our internal world naturally reflects in the external world around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of you mentioning, that you've spoken to younger people and let them know this is something to think about, I understand that you're also involved in lecturing in the particular subjects that you are, the expert in. Share a little bit about what you do there.
As part of my job as the founder of the Orangutan Project is is to communicate with people and to bring them on the journey, because at the moment we've got a $20 million a year problem for 10 years until these ecosystems are sustainable, but we've got a quarter of that income. So we need to grow and connect with people and increase our collectivization. So part of my job to do that. And also part of that is my job is at sometimes is to connect with younger people, who are going to be the custodians of the next generation, the custodians of these ecosystems and the better world we're trying to create. The wonderful thing is when I do meet so many young people in Indonesia and around the world, I'm heartened by how many of them are really of a high caliber integrity. There's a wonderful future there, but the responsibility of our generation is to hand them over a climate and ecosystems which are recoverable, so they can do the good work. If we don't do the hard works in the next 10 years, they can be the best people in the world, but we're not handing something over to them that they can work with and recover and have a planet that's going to be fit to support all the living beings on it.
Yeah, it's certainly important to convey messages to the future generations. Certainly seeing the youth of our current situation there's so many of them are taking active roles in wanting to make change. And I think from just my observation, a lot of them perhaps feel a little overwhelmed because the concept of where are the resources to help them to do that. And obviously we at our level of having been on the planet for as long as we have, and I think we're probably of a similar generation, we've got that knowledge, we've seen what's happened before, we can pass on information to them, and the earlier generations can serve as resources to them, but we've also got to encourage them to see new ways to approach perhaps old problems, ways to try and find new solutions. And obviously with the development of technology, whether that's possible to help resolve the situation that is a current problem. In terms of, I suppose, other areas that you see are recoverable, what actions is involved, or what actions are involved with the Orangutan project and the other projects that you're involved in? What are the things you're actually doing?
Yeah, now you touched on a good point, is when teaching, we have to provide the real life example of affecting meaningful change, because then they can say, I see this guy doing it. I know it can be done because I've seen an example. And that provides the framework of hope and understanding. If you just teach, if I just went around and just talked to people and didn't do anything, it doesn't have that depth. And drilling down, what are we doing? Well, we're working, to save viable populations of orangutans, tigers, and elephants in viable ecosystems, and it has to be the right type, shape, and size of rainforest. So working with companies and not-for-profits to piece together the last remaining ecosystems by either protecting or reforesting those areas, so it works. And it just works out that you need areas about 200,000 hectares each of the right type, shape, and size of rainforest to be viable and sustainable populations of megafauna. That's why zoos are, from a conservation point of view, for megafauna, is a total waste of time. All their populations will go extinct. They can't save themselves, and need to learn to save the species. We have to save them in the wild. We can't save these species in captivity because we need those level of numbers for the biodiversity. Otherwise, they start inbreeding and the population spirals into extinction. So once we piece together these ecosystems, we're working with local communities to develop agricultural systems under rainforest canopy, such as jungle rubber, shade coffee, vanilla, bamboo, rattan, etc. And therefore there's a win-win situation. So the communities are actively involved and engaged with supporting the ecosystems. And so and in the meantime, there's so many orangutans, and elephants which are isolated. Their herds have been killed, or an orangutan, their mothers have been killed, and with these such low numbers of these critically species, every individual is not only important for their the fact that they're individual person, and compassion dictates that we have to care and protect them, because of the sanctity of the individual. But they're also extremely important for the survival of their own species. When species are such low numbers, every individual contains part of the genetic sequence, that is likely to be required for that species to survive. So we spend a lot of time supporting brave young Indonesians out there rescuing orangutans, rehabilitating them, and re-establishing extinct populations of orangutans in these ecosystems.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot of work to do too. And I totally appreciate what you say about the fact that zoos are nice. It's kind of, I'm not a big fan of zoos as I've grown older and become more aware of really what they are from a commercial point of view. I mean, obviously in Victoria here, we have what we call the open plain zoos, and I think there's a couple around Australia where they actually have open land and they operate within that, I suppose, broader environment. But from a perspective of saving them genetically and saving that DNA and saving just that, I suppose, the history, the biological history of the animal, and being able to protect them going forward, I suppose really it's just not as simple as saving them. It's really about protecting them. And you mentioned that there's, you're over in Indonesia. How much time do you spend over in Indonesia throughout the year?
Unfortunately, at the moment, I'm in lockdown in Perth, where we kind of can't move. I usually spent half my time. So I had half my time working, in Indonesia, taking people on eco tours, visiting the projects, going to meetings as a technical advisor. And the other half of my time was engaging with people and fundraising in order to support the work that our partners are doing in Indonesia. So that was kind of how it was before lockdown. But luckily, look, I've got some wonderful Indonesian partners, that I communicate, on a daily basis, who are doing the wonderful work. So everything is still, going full steam ahead there, and I'm just providing what support I can, and fill in the gaps in the glue. And the majority of that is funding. That's what's most needed to support these heroes out in the forest.
So you see, I think if I understand correctly, you started more with a focus on orangutans, and that is, I believe, your area of real expertise. But you've also become involved in some of the other more endangered species, such as the tiger and the elephant. What other, I guess, projects, or what other scope of projects ahead do you have, given that really there's such a huge need for conservation? What other projects do you have on the agenda?
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, because it's never been about, saving one species over another, or even, not looking after human beings over animals. It's a win-win solution for all. So how we came about to develop the International Tiger Project, International Elephant Project, was that originally when we started out, we thought, okay, we're going to save the orangutan. That's going to be the umbrella species where all other species and biodiversity will sit under it. So if we save enough rainforest and areas for orangutans to survive, the others will come along for the free ride. We don't have to concentrate on them. But what we found, two species were falling out from outside of the umbrella. And one was the elephants. The humans and elephants were killing each other over the last remaining patches, trying to survive. And criminal syndicates were coming in, particularly trying to poach the tigers. So we started the other two projects to bring in those species under the umbrella of protection in our grand strategic plan to save all species. And recently, we're obviously, as I mentioned, we're developing agricultural systems with the indigenous communities under the rainforest canopy. But what we've discovered also, because the big multinationals are taking all the land, destroying it for unsustainable monocultures such as palm oil, and so they're just taking over. And what's been left in these ecosystems are not only the wildlife and the biodiversity, but the local community, indigenous communities trying to survive in a small patch of the forest. And what's been happening is they can't even feed the kids. The kids are malnourished. The kids are not getting education, because their agricultural systems of hunter and gathering, which was sustainable over their traditional tribal lands, is no longer sustainable because of the theft of their traditional lands. So we have to provide the opportunity for them to transition from unsustainable agriculture, was sustainable before, to sustainable. That takes about 7 years to plant the vanilla, to plant the vines and bring it to nutrition. So so we're actually feeding the school children to ensure they have enough nourishment to live and learn, and we're providing them education. And as well as obviously supporting the transition of the agricultural systems. So it's, and again, we have some people who may complain that, we're feeding human children because they want to give us the orangutans, or people want to give us this species or that species. But what I try to convey to everybody, it's got to be a win-win solution. This is the only way we're going to make the difference. We can't have, if someone's got their kids starving, whether it's sustainable or not, they're going to cut down the forest. They're going to take the money from the mafia to sell the land. They're going to do something. So you can't suddenly isolate ourselves, in my sense, from the rest of the humanity, rest of the living beings that share our planet. The only way, and this is, but our tribal nature. We want to be us against them. We want to find an enemy. We want to have a battle. This is why they say if climate change was all created by North Korea, it would have been solved right away, and very definable enemy. But because it's us and it's so multifaceted, we don't know how to deal with it, because our tribal brains are set up to find a defined outside enemy and attack it. But we have to. There's two things we have to do. We have to grow beyond our tribal mind, and to start thinking in these win-win solutions. And the subject I address quite a lot in my last book is we have to move from this patriarchal system, where we've disempowered women over time, and women's collective thinking and group thinking and long-term thinking. And so all our boardrooms and governments have male thinking, which is fine in bounds. It's short-term, it's aggressive, it's very good to get stuff done really quick. But for long-term and conservation, it can be quite useless unless it's balanced by feminine power, the community, long-term, and compassion. And so one of the things that we try to do a lot, strategically within our organizations and what we're doing and supporting women collectives, is to regain that balance of feminine power. And again, if some men might think, oh my God, we're giving women power, that means I'm going to be disempowered, but it's actually, again, it's a win-win situation. Men do a lot better, and have healthier lives and environment when women are empowered, So I keep trying to express in my writings and my talks the need to get out of this win-lose situation into a better, fair world. And we can't leave anybody behind, male, female, nationality, species, because at a very deep level and ecological level, we're all connected, and that's the only way we're going to win the situation.
No, absolutely. I very much agree with a lot of what you've said there, particularly about it not being about us versus them. And I think that the trouble I've had with that mindset that I've observed is that there's a real misunderstanding, and I can appreciate why it's there. The misunderstanding that I see is that because so many of us are living a privileged life here in Australia, and the many of us that do have that privilege, we don't really know what it's like to live in a say, a third world country, or a country that has corrupt politics. We think our politics here are corrupt, but We don't even touch the surface of real corruption, where it leads to people being murdered because they don't support the government. And, you know, the people who want to make a difference are being put in prison and things like that. That's the absolute abhorrent treatment of people who want to work together and make a difference and support. But when you have high levels of corruption, or when you have poverty, and when you have really significant life-threatening changes going on in an environment around people, as you say, they're going to take the money and run. They're going to, you know, do what they can to feed their kids. They don't have the same level of educational privilege that we know, and we don't know what it's like for them to be in their situation. So we have to step out of that position of kind of, I don't think of it necessarily as judging. We just don't know what we're really able to appreciate, because we're not there. We're not living it. We're not feeling it. So we have to step away from that us versus them mindset and really show a lot greater compassion, not sit in any level of judgment, and be able to say, well, I'm not there. I don't know what I would do if I was in that situation. So if we can take that kind of stance and appreciate that people need to be supported, people need, and what you're saying there, you're helping to feed the children and empower women. Those steps alone are enough to help take the pressure off people making really unnecessarily and sometimes tragic decisions that are leading to worse things happening, such as buying into the idea of chop down that forest because I need that land, I've got to plant something to feed my kids. You know, if we can really see beyond all of the nitty gritty things and get to the bigger picture, we begin to understand, as you say, we are all connected. Part of the reason I do this particular platform is to reach a global audience, and is to speak to people in different places, doing different things, to broaden the perspective so that we can see, you know, there are people out there that live a totally different life to something that I know, and I can't presume that my way of life is the only way of life, and that would be ignorant if I was to do that. So it's really important, the message that you're sharing, and it's what I'd like to provide this platform for, is that we need to see how other people are going about their daily lives, and how can we make it better? How can we do it for all beings? And it's not just to the extent that we shut one out and only focus on the other. It's about, we're all connected. So just from that perspective, and all of the different work that you're doing, obviously what you do is important, and why you do it is equally important. Share with us why it is that you've been drawn to work in this area. I mean, from my understanding, you've been doing this for probably 30 years or so. What led you down this pathway?
You know, mainly it's about, the intelligent expression of love. And of course, as you mentioned before, my expertise and my research, and qualifications are in orangutans, And so that was a naturally intelligent way to express my love for all beings, through the conservation of orangutans, the rainforest, and then extending the umbrella as far as capacity to go out. And so that's kind of been my journey. But on reflection of what you said earlier, we have to remember, we know that there's no culture which is more or less corrupt than any other. That's just a reality. People are corrupt depending on the environment they're in. Usually in Western democracies, only the very rich are corrupt in their real sense. And most middle class and working class people are very honest. It's only, the ruling elite which tend to have, major inherent corruption. In Indonesia and, in third world countries, it goes further down. That's because they have to. It's part of the system. They have to work within that system in order to survive and prosper. But ethically, they're really no difference. But the other aspect, of course, is our Western democracies, which are keeping the corruption going, to give access to resources and ability and exploitation of the third world. So it's not very good for us, or not accurate for us, to sit back and go, oh my God, these corrupt, horrible people doing stuff, when it's our governments and our ruling elite which is actually driving it, from the outside. So we're very much implicated in the problem. And from a psychological perspective, we can characterize those who have privilege without merit have to demonize the underprivileged in order to support the self-worth. So in other words, I kind of know, look, I was born, you know, in a relatively wealthy country with, you know, social security and that sort of stuff. It wasn't any merit of mine. It just happened to be, I just got lucky. I got born here rather than sub-Saharan Africa.
Exactly.
And so it's without merit, a lot of it, you know. And so in order to justify why I've got this, I have to, you know, psychologically, this is a fallback, is to think, oh, these Africans or these people, they're not as good as us. You look at them, they're corrupt, you know what I mean? They're fighting with each other. That's why they're poor and underprivileged, you know. It's not because, you know, I have, status without merit, you know, opportunity without merit. But that's the case, you know. And so we got to overcome that natural tendency of self-defense and say, actually, you know, the privilege and opportunity of us to be born in, you know, in a affluent Western democracy, you know, so where our worst case scenario is often the dream of so many people, you know. We have this, we have the privilege and the opportunity and obligation, does that make sense, to offer the helping hand, does it make sense, to bring those who haven't had the opportunity up. And we can't create the world which is happy and prosperous unless we do that. We can't leave anyone behind. So this idea of demonizing people of different nationalities is crazy. But it's also crazy from the perspective is, you know, countries don't exist. Companies don't exist. These are what they call legal fictions. You know, we just draw a line, say that's one country, that's another. It's not real. Show me a country, point to a country, point to a company. People will die for these things, but they're not real. What is real is living beings. What is real is nature, and the biosphere support us. So we have to understand we've kind of been brainwashed. Does that make sense? That we're not, and a lot of people say, I don't want to support conservation because you spend your money in Indonesia, because I want to support Australia or America, you know what I mean?
Yep.
What's that? It's not real. You know, why do you want to support something not real? And it's got to the stage where our technology impacts on the globe makes it absolutely crazy for us to think of things on racial or national lines. You know, unless we can go beyond that, we're dooming all our countries, all our people, all our races, and the entire planet to an unlivable future. You know, so it again goes back to our opportunity to reform ourselves. You know, and also the way we think and interact with other living beings. And of course, we got to do that before it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so many valid points there. And in terms of really, if we raise our awareness, I think education is a huge part of that, not only just the institutional education, which is, you know, it serves the purpose, so to speak, to get us educated to read and write and all those things we take for granted, but we need a self level of education. We need to be looking at within ourselves to understand, you know, is what I'm learning about the world around me really valid and true? Or is there a level of authenticity that I can discover about myself that means that there are no real boundaries, there's no real borders that prevent me from being able to do good around the world? And you know, I reflect on World War II, for example, and watching their documentaries about that, when they showed that, particularly in parts of Europe, they were fighting over a map. They were fighting over the land boundaries, which, as you say, really, it was a mountain, it was a river, it was, so in terms of geographically or on land, it was just land, it was just a country, it was just dirt, it was trees. But from a political point of view, on paper, they made it all of these things, and they were fighting for years, and millions of people got killed over this ridiculous state of mind. And if we kind of take that whole silly principle of going to war over a bit of land just to prove power and all those other things that I'm sure Hitler was you know, focused on, we translate that across everything that we do in the world. We're fighting over things that really, at the end of the day, do they have real validity for what we're doing? Are we going into a state of mind where we're getting ourselves caught up in things that make us angry or make us, fight for things and become quite aggressive and too proud about things to consider maybe really at the end of the day, that's not worth it. I can't take those to the grave. What am I leaving for my kids? It's not about the money. It's about the experience. It's about I suppose it's that sense of positive integration within the globe around us. I mean, we need to be able to get along, and we need to be able to do it with anybody, no matter what color their skin, no matter what country they've come from, no matter what religion or politics. None of that really matters. We all bleed red blood. We're all human, and even our non-human creatures. And as you made a valid point much earlier in our conversation, that they have rights as well, and we just haven't acknowledged that. And we're slowly starting to have those conversations, but we're a long way behind. And if we don't start making those changes and raise our awareness and self-education and become more conscious of the choices that we're making and where those decisions have been based, from any sort of social conditioning, we've got 10 years, as you say, to really make a difference. And if we don't start making the changes now, 10 years from now, we just may not be able to make a significant enough impact. Things will be so different. What will it look like for us? So, obviously that sounds all doom and gloom, but if we don't start making changes, we can now, from this point, if I understand your point of view, we can from this point create something positive. We can make inroads, we can change, we can set the principles of success going forward now. But in 10 years, it'll be just too late, or it will be just at a point where it'll be like, paddling upstream in a barbed wire canoe. We won't be getting anywhere. It'll be just almost too late. So would you have any words of advice for anybody that, in terms of those thinking that, what difference can I make? For people that might be questioning that, or looking at themselves and like, how do I do something different? It's only me. I'm only one person. How do I make a difference? Would you have any word of advice that you would pass on to people?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think we've been sold this lie almost like, think globally, act locally, recycle, change your light bulbs, individual actions. That's just allowing us to fiddle while the rich and powerful destroy the world for personal gain. So I think we just got to dismiss that. As I said, and nothing wrong with personal integrity, and I think that's true. Become a vegan, become passionate, loving, and supporting, recycle, get solar panels. That's all fantastic. I've got all of that. But is that going to change the world? No. We have to collectivize, and so how we can be empowered as individuals is we collectivize into organizations such as the Orangutan Project and other many great organizations. And together, by small contributions, people in the Orangutan Project volunteer and they do run stalls and markets. Others don't have time, but they donate money. Others, become our staff and donate their expertise, And so we all can contribute by collectivization. And that way we can all make a meaningful change in the world, and really make a difference, working together. Yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot of things that people can do in terms of, there's this, for me, I've always figured that sense of hopelessness or helplessness or overwhelm or just being so challenged by the enormity of the situation is enough to keep people sort of frozen and feel that they can't do anything. And that comes back to that, there's only me, I'm only one person, what difference can I make? That is a prevailing thought that I've had a lot of people say to me. What difference can I make? There's only me. The difference we all can make is if, as you say, collectivization, if we band together with our friends, band together with our colleagues, start a little movement, because a little movement becomes a bigger movement. You've just got to be vocal enough about it and be proud of what you're doing and have faith and have hope and stand true to the idea that the action that you take, that small action, even though it's a small action, you have a lot of small actions, collectively becomes a big action. So would you say that it's important that people start, sort of take themselves out of the I'm only an individual, what can I do mindset, and really start looking to broaden that into what organizations can I be part of, what groups can I start, how can I join with people, where would they start to be able to make those changes?
Yeah, no, I think it's, well, there's two things. One is collectivization. The second stage is reforming ourselves. Because if you are unhappy and selfish because you're unhappy, you're going to run out of energy. You're going to start something, it's going to fall down, or you come despondent and that sort of stuff. Because happiness may be difficult to find within oneself, but it's impossible to find outside of oneself. That is the truth, but we're given the illusion that money, name, power, position may provide us happiness. And of course, anyone who's received those things can tell you themselves that there's no happiness within them. Once you get them, you realize that happiness doesn't lie there. And so, but the good thing is, if we can find that happiness and joy within ourselves, this becoming a selfless, happy individual, it has to come out, if that makes sense. So it's not all about, do I have the energy, or should I do it? Or does it matter whether I'm just saving one orangutan, or I'm saving 2 or 500? The happiness has to come out. Does it make sense? It's like, if you're unhappy, you can't help making everyone around you unhappy. If you're happy inside, you can't help it. I want to help you. I want to make you happy. I want to do good. And so it's no sacrifice. The joy has to get out. What I mean? Well, why don't you stop? I can't stop. I gotta express it. Otherwise I'm going to burst, So all I gotta do is say, how can I do it intelligently? How can I just, use my discrimination to express my love in a way which is going to have impact and meaning. And so when we're talking about individual action, yes, individual action, I'm not a great fan of. Reforming ourselves as individuals, spending the time to reform ourselves and find our own happiness and inner peace is certainly worthwhile, because that will pay in tenfold dividends, in our ability to express and do good through the world.
Yeah, so I guess another way of saying that for anyone who's kind of pondering this, because we've gone quite down a few deep rabbit holes here, and anyone that's pondering that might be thinking, well, what does he really mean? And my interpretation of that, as I hear that, is individual action on its own. Yes, that's great for integrity. It makes you feel good about yourself. But from a perspective of, if you feel better within yourself and you're aiming to become a loving being, so that you're not sitting in judgment, you're not criticizing others, you're not feeling inadequate in yourself, you're really building on, how am I a good person? How can I feel just giving and being is part of how I am? And if you like, it's a big philosophical journey. It's a big healing journey for a lot of people. But once you've done that, and that's the individual side of it, it becomes kind of like this ripple effect where it impacts everyone else around you positively, and it then builds on that energy. So if that's an understanding, and I would say that people just work on yourself, be open and be true to yourself and be authentic within yourself. Recognize that you can be a power within yourself that starts a big ripple of positive movement. One of the things that I think of, and I remember as we were setting up this interview over the last couple of days, there was a photo that you sent me, and it's included on the flyer for this particular interview. And it's about the photo of you with the orangutan on your back. When I look at that, I actually, the first time I saw that, I started getting watery eyes. I get very emotional when I think about animals. And that made me, like, I was filled with joy. It gave me such an immense sense of, I cannot imagine the joy and the absolute bliss of being able to connect with such a beautiful being as an orangutan, and having it just comfortably sit on your shoulder as if it's accepting you and embracing you as another species. It's not asking, well, you're human, I shouldn't have anything to do with you. It just sees you. It literally just sees you, and it engages with you. And I think if we can learn that, I can imagine just that joy. What's that feeling that you get when you first connect with the orangutan?
I guess there's two things. Is all joy and happiness come from within ourselves, and so we something quietens our mind, our relationship, sex, money, power, something, it quietens our minds, and that joy comes out. Does make sense, because the cloud of the mind for a time doesn't obscure the joy and love and happiness which exists inside of us. But we mistakenly attribute the joy and happiness to the outside agent that just cleared our mind for a while. So I guess that's the first half of the question. The second half is, I'm spending most of my life with orangutans. I've discovered that they're a more noble form of person. They're far more loving, affectionate, calm, beautiful. So I've had the privilege of connecting with a more noble form of humanity that we find in the most intelligent being that shares our planet, the orangutan. And that's obviously just been a wonderful privilege of my life to get to know and have personal relationships with these noble persons that share our planet.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And you say that they're quite calm and, as you say, quite noble. I can only imagine that when you are connecting with them, how much it must just change your own biochemistry, in a sense. It may change your heart rate, change the breathing rate, just change the brain waves, just connecting with them on that level that just, it doesn't need words necessarily. It just needs to be present. And again, I think there's lessons there for all of us, that just being present and being self-aware and being aware of other beings around us can only lead to good, I would think.
Oh, naturally, yeah. It's now, love, joy, happiness, peace. They're all aspects of the same thing. Taken from different sides. And they're all one and the same. So the more we can be present and connected, and realize the fact that actually we're actually not separate. It's an illusion. In fact, all living beings are only my own self living in another life. That's a reality. And of course, obviously, that can't be easily discovered, but it can be. It's not, and it's certainly wonderful if we can discover that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, and one of the things that I'd really like for people to be able to do is to reach out to you if they've got some sort of expertise that they'd like to contribute, or if they'd like to donate, or perhaps even if they want to know how they can further contribute to the projects. That information for our audience, the details that are available in terms of which websites to go to or which links to click on, all of that information will be contained in the description for both this YouTube channel, but also for the podcast. So is there a parting message? Is there something that you would like people to know, or where they can reach you, or anything that you would like to share?
No, the main thing is, if you like to and you feel inspired to help, go to our website, theorangutanproject.org, and join up, get the newsletter, get the connections. If you have lots of money but little time, please donate. If you have a lot of time and little money, please volunteer. And if you want a once in a lifetime opportunity, once the COVID pandemic is over, I take groups into the jungle to meet the orangutans and connect in a very deep way. So so just take the opportunities that you can to join in what I believe is the win-win solution, and to understand this is a journey that we can only do good on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that whole idea, obviously, once COVID is not so big a global threat that it has shown itself to be, once that is passed and, we're able to travel, I can imagine it would be an absolutely life-changing experience to some people, just to be able to go into the forest and to actually have that connection with an orangutan or a whole lot of orangutans. So yeah, that sounds like something that would be really quite amazing. Leif, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you and talking about what it is you do. I just want to say thank you for your time. And again, any of the links associated with Leif's projects will be found in the description. Leif, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
You're welcome.